Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming out today, even though I know you were forced because you're in my class, so you are forced to be here. Or you would get a tardy slip and possibly other consequences. Anyway, today I'm going to speak about black history, particularly introductions to black history. And I'm going to go over the what, the who, what, when, where, how, why, and how of black history. So, let's begin with the why. Why do we celebrate Black History Month? Anyone? Yes.
To honor the famous black people and what they did.
Okay, your answer was to honor the famous black people and what they did. Anyone else? Anyone? No other answers? Latia again.
To acknowledge those who helped us get where we are today.
Wow, you would think I paid you to sit here. To acknowledge those who helped us to get where we are today. Anyone besides the illustrious Latia? Okay. Another reason I want to add into, I want you to understand is, you study history to learn from somebody's accomplishments and their mistakes. America has made accomplishments. America has made mistakes. Black Americans have made accomplishments, and we've also made mistakes. Today I'm going to deal mostly with the accomplishments. And I'm also going to break the idea that black history has solely to do with blacks in North America or the United States. Because black history, when it's properly studied, is worldwide. And for this reason, in the 1900s, a fraternity brother of mine named Carter G. Woodson developed Negro History Week. A whole week devoted to studying the accomplishments of the Negro, because at that time, the Negroes weren't being recognized in the history books, such as the Native Americans, the so-called Native Americans, because America wasn't called America until the 1500s. And if the Native Americans were there before the 1500s, you can't call them actually Americans because they had another name. So we call them so-called Native Americans, even though many of them may be proud of that title now, but that's another topic. Let me get back to what I'm talking about. They had Negro History Week. Carter G. Woodson started Negro History Week. It developed into Negro History Month in February, and it then was changed from Negro to Black History Month. Many call it now African Diaspora History Month. Diaspora means dispersion, people moving around and spreading out. African only meaning that people who call themselves black or referred to as black have African descent. So it's not necessarily black, but it's of African descent. So we have Negro History Week, Negro History Month, Black History Month, and now African Diaspora History Month, even though many people still call it Black History Month. We celebrate this in February because it began as Negro History Week in February, first week in February. But we study it, as back to the why, we study it to learn from the accomplishments and the mistakes. Who? Question of who? Who should celebrate Black History Month? Yes. Harriet Tubman is somebody we may study in Black History Month, but who should study Black History? Who should celebrate Black History Month? Tanya? Everyone. Okay. Let's hear it.
Everybody.
Anyone else? Anybody else feel differently?
Oh, everyone.
Okay. Now, for a long time, many people felt that only blacks should study Black History Month. However, the more the information has become available, you can see that Black History Month affects everybody. You can see that Black History Month will affect everybody. No matter what your race is, it affected you somehow. And I'll get into that a little later on. So, question of what? What should we study when we study Black History Month? I gave you the answers already. Accomplishments, and I'm going to put that on the table.
Yeah.
Ooh. We should study the accomplishments and mistakes of what? Black people. Where are black people? Okay, prove that. Okay, you may not be able to, but after you finish this presentation, after you listen to this presentation, I'll be able to prove that for you. Okay, so in the what? We're going to study the accomplishments and the mistakes. When should you study Black History Month? Black History.
Every day.
I'm of the mindset that you shouldn't stick it in just one month. You should learn about all cultures all the time. It's called inclusion. Learn about how the Africans and the Chinese interacted. Learn about how the Africans and the so-called Native Americans interacted. Learn about, actually I should say so-called Africans, because the actual name for Africa is Acabulan. The indigenous or the original name for Africa was Acabulan, or some say Acabulan. But since we're all familiar with the English word or European word Africa, I'll stick with that. So actually I could say so-called Africans as well as so-called Native Americans. But you can learn about those connections. You can learn about the so-called connections with the Africans and the Europeans, Africans and the Hawaiians. You can find about everything. There's a lot of connections, and we can all study and find a bit of ourselves in studying Black History Month. I'm still at when though? Why should we just study it in February? I mean, why should we study it all the time? I gave you an answer for that. But why? Is there another reason why we should study it all the time? Yes.
So we can learn about it just like we learn about everybody else.
Exactly. Okay. So make sure that you don't just subjugate yourself to studying about people of African descent during February. It needs to happen all the time. Where should you study?
Everywhere.
Okay. We can't confine it to one place. You can't expect the school to give you everything, because the school has some other things they need to teach you. You can't expect the church to give it to you, but the church needs to do more of it. The church's not doing as much as it needs to. Particularly because the church doesn't know about its African roots. And that's another presentation, but I won't get into that. It shouldn't be just at home. But your family should give you a whole lot of information to study, particularly if you're of African descent. Society should teach you that. At the moment it doesn't, and that's something that we expect you to change. And we don't expect you to change just for blacks, just for Black History Month, but for all cultures, so we can all have an understanding of the inclusion and the oneness. How? That's the serious part. And that's what we're going to deal with today. How do you study or celebrate Black History Month? Mr. Brian.
Read books.
Read. You know what? There's a saying. It's an old saying. If you want to hide something from a black person, put it between the pages of a book. We got to get away from that, folks. Got to get away from that. For those of us of African descent, we fought so long and hard to learn how to read English. Understand that when some of the slaves that came over, they were able to read and recite and write in Arabic, their tribal language. Some knew French, some knew Spanish. Just didn't know English. And some people died to learn that language and to learn how to read, and now some of us don't want to read. It may be boring at first, but once you train yourself for it, you'll enjoy it. And once you get more information, it'll be good for you. That's only one way. What's another way of learning? How? How do you learn? How do you celebrate?
Watch films.
Films, discussions, videos. It's any way you can. Don't just limit it to saying, well, I'm not going to learn it because it's only about reading. You can listen to music. You should travel to another place. Go to Brazil. Okay? Go to India. Go to Mexico. Go to Chile. You'll find things by traveling. A lot of us get stuck in one place and we don't want to travel. We have to get beyond that as well. I'm going to take this time to show you some information that you may not have normally been exposed to when dealing with Black History Month. Most of the time when they deal with Black History Month, they talk about Martin Luther King over and over and over. Rosa Parks, who was on TV this morning, I hope you caught it. They talk about Jesse Jackson, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was a friend of my father's. They used to hang out in Brooklyn. They talk about the same people of who? Josephine Baker. But they talk about the same things over and over and over, and that bothers me. And when I was your age, I got turned off. Mary McLeod Bethune. We can go on and on, but they talk about the same things over and over and over. I want to kind of expand and talk about some things that are normally not connected with Black History Month, particularly in the schools. Some of this information may be controversial. If your parents have any problems with what I've taught you, they can come to me and I will show them the documentation, proof, and research that I used for this presentation. I wouldn't show you anything that was fake. So, to the best of my ability, I pulled together some information and research that is right and exact, is true, and I can show and prove that. So if anyone has any questions, or if you have some interest, come and ask me and I'll get you that information. Let me go ahead and begin. Okay, as I said earlier, there are lessons to be learned from history, and we need to learn that. And it says history should not keep you in the past, it should be joined with the present and the future. We should learn lessons from history. Repeating mistakes should be avoided. Strengths should be remembered. So let's go into some information that can teach us some history. It can also teach us some mistakes and some lessons. Okay. We spoke of Jackie Robinson earlier. Here's a picture of Jackie Robinson. It's a hard to see picture, but the strength, I said the accomplishments and the mistakes. An accomplishment we can learn from this. That whenever somebody is given a chance, whether you be white, black, yellow, red, whatever the case is, but particularly for African Americans, whenever you're given a chance to excel, you will do exceedingly well if you apply yourself. Jackie Robinson was not allowed to play baseball on the white teams for a long time who were making the money. Then when he was allowed, he did exceedingly well. The mistake is, some of us now feel that the only thing we can do is dance, play sports, or do music. We don't think that's the only way we can achieve, is by dancing, playing sports, and doing music. That's not the case. That's a mistake. Learn from that mistake, because many other people thought that that's the only way they could achieve something if they were black, by doing those things, and that's just not the case. But remember from Jackie Robinson that if you have the chance, you can achieve great things. Another thing we need to remember is the strength we have in our family. Our family has always been a foundation that's kept us strong. Our mistake is right now, a lot of us are getting so wrapped up in material things, we value the material possessions over our family. And that's going to be a mistake that's going to be our downfall. Those who value material things over their family and their people and their fam will go down. Will be reduced to nothingness. Your strength is in your family and your people acting as a united front. Don't let anybody break you up just because of some material stuff. And that's important. That's an important lesson to learn. And that's something that we really need to understand. Let me deal with one side of it first. In order to understand slavery, you have to understand how slaves were maintained. Okay? You can't just accept that people were slaves and then they got out and just leave it at that. You have to understand how people were made into slaves so you can make sure that doesn't happen again. So you can make sure it doesn't happen again. Not just for our people, but for anybody. You need to make sure you understand it. One thing about slaves, they publicly beat the slaves. They beat them in public. They harassed them. They embarrassed them in public. Until a person gave in. Until that slave gave in. And that taught the rest of the slaves to stay in check. Life is going to try to beat you down at times. Don't let it beat you down and put you down, because then you'll be teaching other people to be submissive. That's a strong, the mistake was too many slaves learned from watching someone else get beat up to be submissive. We can't allow that to happen anymore. We cannot allow that to happen. And women, too many women have seen other women get beat and started accepting that that's the way it should be. Things are starting to change now, but it should have changed a long time ago. It's up to you, ladies and gentlemen, to realize that's not acceptable on any terms. The flip or the flip-flop. Either way, it's not acceptable. But when people see people humiliated, we see people get talked about every day, and we laugh at it, and we accept it, and we think that's what we're supposed to do. That's not necessarily how you're supposed to act. But you've gone to accept that. In the same way somebody can beat you up and humiliate you, when you speak about somebody, you diss them, you're doing the same thing. And the same way that some men used to laugh while women got beat are the same ways when somebody talks about somebody else, you guys laugh at it. You're learning the same lesson. Break out of that lesson. Learn from that mistake. Another thing is they taught them to be inferior by always showing white people in power. I'm not sure if you know, but when Jet magazine first started, Jet is a small magazine that's dealing with black folks. Blacks wouldn't buy products if the models were black because they thought they were inferior products. So when Jet magazine began, they had to use white and Asian models because we wouldn't buy anything unless it had a white or Asian person on the cover. If it had a black person on it, we thought it was inferior. The slave masters taught us to hate ourselves. Look how long it's taken us to get past that. We still going around, ew, you black, da-da-da, you dark, you stayed out in the sun too long. We still ashamed of that. We got to get past that. If not, we're still slaves. Slaves minimum. And that goes to the last thing. Teach them to hate anything African or anything black. And give favors and say that people who are lighter are better. Oh, that would be a pretty baby if it stayed light. When babies come out, oh, if it can just keep its color. If it can just stay light like it is. And when it starts getting dark, the mothers get upset. The fathers get upset. When the babies first come out, their hair is curly. Oh, I hope that hair doesn't nap up. I hope it stays like that. And when it does, oh, the hair's going from good to bad. Now we calling our children bad because they have hair like us. We're calling our children bad because their skin is dark as us. And then when it was light, we thought it was beautiful. We thought it was pretty. But now when it gets dark and when the hair starts getting curlier and not straight, we start saying it's not as pretty as it used to be. And you know that happens. And that's still part of that slavery mentality. That's still that slave in us that always thinks that to be right, it has to be white. We got to get out of that, ladies and gentlemen, or we're still slaves. So there's some lessons that we can learn. One lesson I want to show to you now. When we speak about America, you've heard of Christopher Colon, or Cristoforo Colon. His name wasn't Christopher Columbus. His name was Cristoforo Colon. We know that in 1492 he supposedly sailed the ocean blue. We know about that, right? We learned that in preschool, elementary school. Okay. If Christopher Columbus was sailing the world to prove that the world wasn't flat, where did he get his maps from? When everybody around him was saying the world was flat.
One was Amerigo Vespucci.
America is named after Amerigo Vespucci, who was a map maker. But Christopher Columbus didn't rely on his maps alone.
Marco Polo.
Marco Polo. Let me tell you exactly what I'm going to. And Marco Polo traveled. The reason Marco Polo traveled and knew that the world wasn't flat because he traveled in some other areas. The Africans, Native Americans, who are so-called Native Americans, always drew the world as being round. Why? Because they had sailed around the world before the Europeans did. They knew that. When Christopher Columbus started his travels, he went to Africa, the tip of Africa, North Africa, and got maps. Remember I showed you a picture of the Moors? He got Moorish maps, He got Moorish maps, and he used that to sail around the world. Interestingly enough, he got lost, thought he was going to the West Indies. He landed in South America. He was lost. He thought he was in the West Indies, so he called the people Indians. And now some of us still call them Indians, which is a name that refers to people who are lost. He was lost and he called them Indians, and we accepted that. You see that slave mentality? We just accept things. We got to get past that. Got to get past it. Well, there's a book, and you can find this book in our library. The African Presence in Ancient America. Notice he says the word ancient America because the word America was not placed on this continent until the 1500s. They came before Columbus. Who was they? As you can see here, these are African features. Thick lips, thick flat nose. You'll see a little later. African presence in early America. Let me show that to you right now. First, to understand that, you have to understand this. Here is North America. Here's South America. This is Central America. This is Africa. This is Europe. Well, you see these lines here. Here's a line with some arrows. When you see that circle, when you see this circle, those are currents. If you throw something in the water, the current will take it. If you left the coast of Africa and got on this current, and it's a big wide space, it will take you where? South America. If you get at the top, now notice I told you Christopher Columbus got maps from the North Africa up here. Okay, Spain was over here, right above Africa. Christopher Columbus only had to go right there to get the maps. You take it from here, and the current will take you where? North America. That's important to ask. I'm going to hold that slide right here. Now this, turn it over. This is a Negroid or African statue that was found in Veracruz. Veracruz is part of where? Mexico. It said South America. This is thousands of years old. Before Christopher Columbus. Thousands of years old. What did Christopher Columbus say when he made his report to Queen Isabella of Spain? When I got to West Indies, what I thought it was the West Indies, I saw Africans there trading with the Indians. How did he know the Africans were truly there? Because before Christopher Columbus went, Europeans had tried to invade Mexico before, and they were beaten by the Africans and the Indians together. They have pictures of that in the Aztec ruins, of the Africans and the Indians working hand in hand to defeat the Europeans coming over. Okay. Anybody here study Spanish in school here? Anybody take Spanish? Miss 14? She's from a country called Honduras. These pictures are from Copan, Honduras. These aren't pictures, this is a statue. If I was standing next to the statue, I would be about this tall. If I was standing next to the statue, I would be about this tall. These big African statues are found in Honduras, which is part of Central America. Which once again, and these are thousands of years old too. Proves that Africans had made it over to North America, Central America, South America before Columbus did. They don't show you this in school normally, do they? I wonder why. Okay. Olmec statues. The Olmecs were some Africans and some mixed African Asians and Asians at times who came over to North America, South America, and Central America. The Olmecs helped the Aztecs to build their pyramids. Those were the Mandingo of the African Aztecs. The Asian Olmecs came over and taught them some other things. Now, these are African Olmecs. This, as you can see, thick lips, flat nose, thick lips, flat nose. You know he's black. Don't he look like he's been eating too much chitlins? He's kind of big boy. All right. Now this was in San Lorenzo. This is in San Lorenzo, and this is in Tres Zapotes. These are all in Mexico. Now, once again, if I stood next to him, I would be about this tall. These things are large, and they were carved out of stone. Okay. You may wonder that you see the men, but you don't see women statues. I'll get to that a little later. But if you study African history and culture, it wasn't a patriarchal system like we have here. It was matrilineal. In other words, things were kind of even, but the women were elevated over the men. And so the women did things in the country. They were like the governors, I guess the mayors and things of that nature. And the men went out and conquered and explored and did other things and came back, and it was a different system. Now, these pictures are, let me see. This is all, once again, parts of Mexico. Some more Olmec statues. These are the African, you know he's a brother. Look at them lips. Okay. Now, you can look at the side of his head, and you can see right here, afro. They have helmets on. They have helmets on. This is a hard picture to see back here, and I'll show you two in another picture. You'll see it very clear in this picture. Okay. Here's another picture from Tres Zapotes, which is in Mexico. Now this is a Nubian chief in Kenya. I just want you to see this picture and compare it to this. Alright. Now you see the afro here, right? He had a fro. I mean,
Like trees.
All right.
His forehead should have an M.
Okay. Look at the nose. Look at the lips. Once again, I would stand about this tall. Now, he actually has a shag. Remember those styles that had an afro and they had a shag in the back? Came out? He has a shag in the back. And let me show you a few other pictures. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of the ancient gods, the people they worshipped in Mexico, some of them were black and some of them were Asian. These are some of the gods that they worship. As here, this is a picture of the Sphinx, and you can see the connection. These are all Africoid or Negroid features. Okay, this one is African and Asian mixed together. You can see the difference. But these are all found in the New World, North and South America. Now, let's jump over to slavery. Has anybody ever seen this picture before? We've seen this picture before? Okay, this is the Great Ma'apa. Understand that in the movement from Africa to the New World, now Africans came in slavery to South America first. They didn't come to North America. They didn't come to the United States first. They came to South America first. Okay? Understand that. You have to understand that. They came in ships and they were packed in like sardines. One ship could hold about 200 people comfortably. They would pack 500 people in. Okay? And once I said before, many of these people came over were literate. They were able to speak Arabic. Some knew Spanish. They knew the Quran. They memorized the Quran. Some of the Africans that came over, they had brought them specifically because they knew how to work gold, metal. They didn't pick up dumb people. They picked the best, the brightest. So they can come over here and work. Once again, they worked in South America first. In South America, what happened is Europeans went over there, they tried to take over. They took over. The Native Americans didn't work the way that they wanted them to because Native Americans knew the area. They were able to run in the hills and the mountains and hide. So they said, well, we're going to have to grab somebody who doesn't know their way around here. That's if I came in here and tried to take over this school and made you work. You know where all the secret hiding places in the school are, right? You could hide from me if I had never been in here. But I can grab somebody else who doesn't know where they're from, and I can control them better because they don't know where they are. And that's what happened. So, packed in. Interestingly enough, and this is something they never tell you about when they talk about slavery in school. Women were used as slaves too. Not only black women, white women. It was a law in some states, if a white woman married a black guy who was a slave, then that white woman became a slave too. Now, Europeans used to get their women to come over from England, marry the slaves. And now they had control over not only the blacks, but the white women too. It happened. It didn't happen all the time, but it did happen. And they don't ever tell you about this. This is never shown. Another thing that they never talk about, and this is out of the way of slavery, but this goes to understanding information about Africa. When we think of martial arts, what do we think of? Karate. Where do we think it came from? Japan, Okinawa, China. Okay. Understand, ladies and gentlemen. Understand, ladies and gentlemen. Martial meaning discipline. Arts meaning something you study that develops and makes you a better person. Martial arts was studied all over America. Wait. Martial arts was studied all over the world. Every group had its own martial arts. It wasn't just the Orientals that had, the Asians that had martial arts. Every group had martial arts. If you go to South America, have you ever seen breakdancing before, back in the day? Breakdancing came from a dance called capoeira. Capoeira is African martial arts in Brazil. Okay, you saw a movie about that? Okay. But that's where breakdancing came from. Capoeira was the way that the Africans in South America were able to hide the fact that they were practicing martial arts. Because the master would come by and say, you guys aren't learning how to fight. No, master, we just dancing. And they would have the drums, and they would have the guitars, and they would play. And they thought they were dancing. But they were practicing martial arts. If you ever seen a kata looks like a formalized dance where they do certain movements. That's what capoeira is. Interestingly enough, martial arts began in Egypt. And when a group of Egyptians moved into the areas of Japan and China, they took that martial arts with them. Martial arts became very popular in the Orient, and that's why we know it as the Orient now. Matter of fact, here's a picture of a person doing capoeira. And I'm going to take some pictures now. I didn't intend for them to be parts of this presentation. But I think I will go ahead and include this in the presentation because it's interesting. Now, when we see this picture, some African Americans get very upset. For good reason. Save our land, join the Klan. We may know about the destructive acts that the Klan did to not only blacks, Jews, women, and Native Americans. We know about that, but I'm not sure if most of us know where the Klan got their suits from. And I'm going to show that to you. Now, when you look at this picture, what do you think it is? Okay. Picture below is a parade of Seville Negro order. In other words, in Spain, in Seville, Spain, the blacks that live in Spain, they don't tell you there's blacks in Spain. But I showed you about the Moors before, right? Now you know. The blacks in Spain have a celebration that they go every year. They've been doing it for centuries, way before the Ku Klux Klan began. This is what they've been wearing for hundreds of years. These are blacks. Now, the Klan didn't start till the maybe the early 1800s. Early 1800s, 1900s. Huh? About the turn of the century, right. This has been going on for centuries in Spain. Since the Moors were kicked out of Spain in 1492. They've been having this celebration. Where did the Klan get their suits from?
Black people.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were chasing.
Yes, ma'am. Speak up, please.
Since everybody get on talk shows and talk about how they don't like the Ku Klux Klan and all that, how come they don't never talk about the blacks who brought the suits out and that's where they got it from now?
People don't want to study. Real simple. People don't want to study.
How come somebody like you don't get up there?
I don't get on talk shows because I do lectures. I do lectures all the time around the state, wherever somebody takes me. And most people don't want to take the time to listen to a lecture. They'd rather be out drinking and partying. That's what it comes down to. People would rather party than learn. And unfortunately, because of that, if you want to hide something, interestingly enough, to go on in that, you know when the Europeans took over America, they didn't have to kill all the Native Americans to do it. You know what they did? Got them drunk. Got them addicted to alcohol. Addicted to drugs. On the weekends, after the slaves had worked a long, long week, and they had the weekends off, what did the master give them so they would be cool? Gave them alcohol. Same trick, both places. It works every time. You just get people to party and forget about their troubles, and they will forget about their troubles. And that's what happens. Let me show you some signs, and I'm waiting for Mr. White to come because he's going to allow you to leave. He's going to come and tell you it's time to leave. These are some symbols that you may have seen before.
There you go right there.
Well, he hadn't come to the door yet.
For real, this ain't getting good, boy. With a piece, yep.
Okay. Okay. This is an Ankh. A-N-K-H. It's a symbol of life. It's an African symbol of life. You may also see this, particularly the women may see this. Okay, that's a fertility symbol. Fertility symbol and the Ankh, basically the same thing. Let me give you, you may see this on Egyptians, you may see Africans wear this. Let me tell you what it means. This part is the woman. Now I told you before, the Ankh means a symbol of life. It's called the key of life. This part is the man. Male and female get together and you have everlasting life. Alright? Because as long as men and women have children, life will continue. Everlasting life. This is a child. Some people will tell you it's this line across here, but this is actually the man. And if you notice, The woman has this part of her body where the child comes out and things go in to make the child. The man has this part of his body where things come out to go in here to make children. Okay. Let me show you. Do you see another symbol in here you may have been familiar with? There's another symbol. Well, for this one, the fertility symbol are used by like African women use it. All over the world, women have used it to show them that they are fertile. And in this symbol, it symbolizes the female over the male, because the female is bigger than the male, because it's showing women that they need to develop themselves and fertilize themselves and become fertile products. Now, do you see another symbol in this symbol? Something you've seen before.
A peace sign. A peace? No. A cross.
A cross. Now, let me show you what the cross is. What did I just do?
Erase the lady, the woman.
I took away the woman. If I take away the woman, reproduction cannot happen. Life cannot continue. They used to believe that death, and people still do, death is going into birth again. You're going into heaven, you're reborn. Okay. If you kill the woman, if you take the woman out of the equation, when somebody dies and moves to that second stage, they can't be born. So you don't just kill them physically, you kill them spiritually. The Romans knew this because the Romans took over Africa for a period of time. And then they started using the cross as a symbol for death, and they also used the cross to crucify people. So what did they do? They take away the woman, and it can't return. You cannot have life. Interesting. Interesting, isn't it? I don't know if they told you that before. I don't know if they showed you that. Now, the Christians walk around with crosses, and I'm not just saying the Christians. I'm not talking about religion. I'm just talking about history. The Christians didn't wear crosses until first they wore a fish. All right, they wore a fish. Now, you may see a fish. It's like
Be on the back of people.
okay, it's like that. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, what is this?
Eternal.
Oh, well.
Infinity. What am I doing?
Then you have that.
Okay, I don't want to get too deep on it. Okay, the Christians used that fish for a long time. Then one of the popes said, if you call yourself a Christian, you have to use this cross to remind you that Jesus was killed upon the cross. That person that made him do that wasn't a Christian. He was actually dissing him. I want you to remember that your Savior died. I want you to remember that he's not alive. That was one of the popes did. I mean, not a pope, but one of the Roman emperors did that. I'm sorry, one of the Roman emperors. They did that to remind the Christians that, hey, you can't rise above that because we killed your Savior. The Christians took it and made it something different. They took it something they could be proud of. One last symbol, and then I'll let you go. Not a problem. How many people have seen this symbol before?
Guru.
Oh, yeah, that's a KKK.
That's a swastika. The swastika. Now, Hitler and the Nazis, KKK, who will connect themselves with the Nazis, you may see this symbol. But let me show you where they got this symbol from. This is an African symbol for life. All right? This is life. What's this? Death. Because it's the opposite of life. For everything, there's an opposite. For man, there's woman. For dark, there's night. For life, there's death. He turned around the life symbol and made it death. Both of these symbols, this symbol came from an African symbol. The cross came from the Ankh, and Ankh was an African symbol. Most of us don't realize that. Now, one day, I'm going to have to get into them, and I'm going to try to do that in the next 2 days, get into the connection between the Native Americans and the Africans. There's a lot of connections. I'm part of the Cherokee Nation, okay? Most African Americans have Indian in them. Have a nice day, ladies.